And a very good afternoon to all from, in my case, Johannesburg. I know we have people on this call from the Eastern Cape, and quite possibly the Western Cape as well. And in fact, our guest speaker is currently in the Western Cape in, I don't know if it's sunny or not, Stellenbosch. Joburg is absolutely beautiful today. Sunshine, blue skies. Is it sunny there, Jaco?
It's quite wet and cold, to tell you the honest truth, Tony.
Yeah.
But Stellenbosch is always a nice place to be in, doesn't matter how it looks like. Unfortunately, the wine has all dried up. Nobody wants to give us wine down here.
Yes, because of the restrictions. But anyway, so a very warm welcome to everybody on the call, and a very, very important welcome to Jaco Maas, our guest speaker for this afternoon. Jaco, great to have you with us. Good to see you again.
Thanks.
Jaco has been a long-standing member of the Eastern Cape chapter, having served on the committee for quite a number of years. He's also a winner of one of our regional IT awards a couple of years ago. So I'll leave him to do the rest of the intros, but welcome to you. I see Prof. Lynn's online, and we have apologies from Prof. Andre, who's got class or exams or something at the university. But it's great to have you all with us and all the other attendees. Just before I hand over to Jaco, I'm doing a bit of a sales pitch, not only for the Institute, but for our profession and for the country. We are running our annual IIT PSA and Joburg Centre for Software Engineering at WITS Skills Survey. And we really would appreciate the participation of all the practitioners in the country, or as many as we can, to make that survey really, really worthwhile. So we're going to, it is a definitive skills survey, and it's been run for more than 10 years. We have a link on our website. I'll post it a bit later in the chat group, but please, if you can participate. There's a survey for practitioners and also for companies. So back to the business at hand, and the topic of today's webinar is innovation with a purpose. And our guest speaker is Jaco Maas. So I'm going to hand over to Jaco to introduce himself and to take us through his looks like a very interesting discussion. So Jaco, thanks for joining us from Stellenbosch, and we really look forward to this.
Thanks, Tony. And I would like to just put up this. We tried our best to be in a quiet place, but unfortunately I'm quite in a busy place. So I do ask for apologies if there's any sounds that are coming through. That is a little bit, I'm in a busy office here. Thanks, Tony, for the opportunity. It's always a great pleasure talking to the community and the ITPSA, and I'm privileged being part of you guys and sharing some of the ideas. We've got this business called Shift, which transcended from a digital transformation. Let's call it a roadmap that we took with a company called BKB. It's a large agricultural organization in the Eastern Cape, serving big time of some of the big farmers in South Africa. And we established this business Shift. So I'm heading up that, and I will share some of the ideas that we have around specifically how we utilize blockchain in the value chain. But I think for today, I would really like to share some ideas with regards to the traceability in the food chain and some of the technologies, some of the market trends that is happening. And we as technologists is starting to find purpose in the stuff that we do through the technologies that we work with. For that, I would like to go on and just sketch a picture of what's currently happening with the food in the world. So the global forces that's affecting food, you can see here at the right-hand corner. The world population is set to grow from 7.3 billion people to 9.7 in the next 30 years. So we are looking at almost an additional 30% more people that's going to be on this face of the earth. Now that does bring certain challenges up. Now if you look at the top left, we see we are wasting about 33% of the food that we are generating. Now in developing countries, the reason for that is that there is just such an oversupply and that food goes to waste. In underdeveloping countries or more developing countries, we get that the infrastructure just doesn't get the food to the people that requires that food to eat. The fact is that agriculture as a commodity, and we will see when we get into the technologies, the transformative 12 technologies that I would refer to, that there is a lot of pressure on our environment, the agricultural community, with regards to problems like utilizing these natural resources, water specifically, and getting the blame for global warming that is have a significant impact on the earth that we are all feeling, specifically us in the Eastern Cape now currently quite serious drought. But then here at the bottom, you will see that only 1% of the world's population is actually actively producing food for us, for the community. However, there is a large adoption of technology in this specific space. The reality is, and I will very much focus that because our focus is so much, is that the world will require 80% more protein in going forward on this. So for that, I would like to go through some of the market trends that is happening in the food industry and what we are seeing is driving this thing coming from the market itself. One thing is that we are changing consumer preferences. Now, I think we all can relate to this when we go into a supermarket and we stand in front of a shelf. We have consumers these days that is quite inquisitive, want to know more about their food. They want to know that it is healthier. They want to know that the food that they are buying is benefiting somebody around right at the ground floor. They want to know that specific food is environmentally friendly. We don't want to see that the plastic straws, and we want to hear the stories about turtles being killed. So we have a type of sense of this is not just about food, it's so much more about the story of the food and where it comes from. So we are seeing a consumer that is way more, let's say, conscious and aware of what is actually in the packaging. And I think personally, and that goes hand in hand with the next slide when it goes into food safety and transparency, there's something that specifically drives me because 12 years ago, I learned that I need to really start asking questions about the food that I traditionally thought was safe. I needed to know what was the ingredients. And we as a business, we believe, and our purpose is very much so, that we would like to tell that story, but I will get into that a little bit later. The reality with regards to food safety and transparency is something that drives a lot of these technologies because more information about the food that we eat, but it's also the safety issues. Now, there's quite a few examples that spring into mind for us recently. We had the old listeriosis problem a couple of years back. We were joking very much. Some of the jokes that was going around, typical South African, was about the killing, that polonies were killing people. The fact is that listeriosis problem that we had killed about 220 people in South Africa. The impact of the fact that we couldn't trace back where that problem came in the food supply chain was that we remember it well, that all of the polonies, all of the pork products that was produced was taken off the shelf because we didn't know which product was actually the infected products. More recently, and not so much in the consumer space, we had the foot and mouth outbreaks that was locked down the wool industry totally for about 4 to 6 months, and the loss that they say was quite in the high billions of rand that the industry lost because they couldn't export. And even as early as last year, we had foot and mouth disease that also locked down the livestock industry. So we very much had the COVID problem in the livestock industry a couple of just as recent as 18 months ago. Another big thing that is driving the market is the rising of uncertainty. Now, it is sometimes a statement that you must, depends on which line of or side of the line you are sitting for, but the tension that was between the US and China, we've got global trade tensions that comes from that. We've got transportations, and just look at what happened in the Suez Canal and how backed up we are now with regards to containers, the movement of containers, just because a ship was stuck for a couple of days in the Suez Canal. We've got uncertainty in terms of interest rates as well as labor costs. And just remember the labor cost thing, because I'm going to get back to the labor issue a little bit later, also when we start talking about technology, because it does raise certain questions when it gets to that. The market trends now. Customers and even people would like to be associated with businesses that does not necessarily shy away from this innovation and differentiation, but wants to know, that they are actively working in an environment that is utilizing this technology and changing their business model. The picture that you see there of that lady pointing to that food is from a concept store that was created by the Coop Group in conjunction with Accenture, where the boards that is sitting on top of those, that electronic boards where she's looking up, that you really just point to the food. And once you point to the food, it will tell you exactly the story of the food, where it came from, what was the carbon footprint that it left, and who is actually being benefited by buying this food, which is tremendous in terms of this is where the future of food production is going to. And lastly, mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions will always be part and parcel of the corporate landscape, as we have these rising brands, but there is also a lot of pressure on these brands, and I will share some of that in examples that I will show later on. Okay, so let's get into the beat of the presentation, and this is all about this transformative 12 technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. This is a part and parcel of a set of articles that was written by the World Economic Forum, where they specifically look at the food production value chain and the technologies that is having a major impact on that. So if I can classify them, and I would like to go through this presentation, then looking at them specifically when we look at those 12. So we've got the changing the shape of demand. And when we talk about these various technologies, we need to take it within the context of changing the shape of demand, promoting value chain linkages, and creating an effective production system. And I would like to then go through this presentation and look at each of these technologies and maybe just try to bring it a little bit back home in how it's affecting us and how it is absolutely a reality currently in our environment. So let's start it off with alternative proteins. Now, the reality with the alternative proteins is that as income levels is actually rising, there is a more or a bigger need for meat and the traditional protein as we know it. Now, the reality of that is that the increase in production and producing more meat is putting a heck of a lot of pressure on natural resources. Therefore, there is now a big drive to alternative proteins. So we see that we get meat substitutes. There's emerging alternatives, which is, I must say, scary for myself, that we are talking about insect proteins, we are talking about algae that we produce from the sea, and various other types, but then also the lab-grown meat, which is meat that is grown in labs that we eat. The picture with the Beyond Burger, which is all a plant-based, is there's a big drive now to tell you that, listen, this plant-based meat is as same as the meat. The meat industry is now attacking this back and has gone to court, and I think they won the battle that this may not be called a alternative meat or a burger whatsoever, as this is not meat in its true sense. So you can see there's a lot of issues with this, but the reality is this is, although a very small market, a market that is growing as an alternative source of protein. Once again, take note that we are looking at this in the changing shape of demand. When we get to the next one, it's all about food censoring, the technologies for food safety. And I will later on, when we talk about the value chain, refer back to this with regards to blockchain. But the reality is that we are seeing more and more the ability for us to start connecting to various sensors. Now, I put this RFID as well as NFC tags, as well as this VeChain company that I looked at a very interesting YouTube clip the other day, where they are integrating RFID technology together with NFC that allows then the food supply chain to utilize this technology by scanning through RFID. But when it gets to the consumer, you can just use an NFC reader that's situated in your cell phone to now scan the product and get a better idea of where the product came from. Interesting about the NFC technology is because it uses a wire, it can actually be utilized to also secure the product, to make sure that when you open it, you break that antenna, which means that the product is then compromised and then shows you that you can believe that this product has been safely transported through the value chain. Now we are getting into some interesting stuff, and not stuff that I'm so well known of, but the changing of the shape and demand once again into nutrigenetics for personalized nutrition. Now this is really something interesting, because this is now where we start working with the underlying genetics of the product. And what is interesting about this is that they found that there is a lot of diseases that we as people are finding, specifically with regards to obesity, as well as heart diseases, that comes from I would almost like to say, a clash between the genetics of the plant and the genetics of the person. Because studies have found that the two people will have the exact same diet, but the effect will be different with regards to that. So now they are starting to look at the underlying genetic profile of the food, and how that underlying genetic profile is then relating back to your specific profile. That then make sure that we can maybe address something like heart disease, as well as some of the obesity stuff. It might be that we are a little bit obese, and it is not necessarily our fault. It's just genetics of the plant, which is a noble idea to have. So let's get into the promoting of the value chain linkages. And it started off with mobile service delivery. And as I said to Tony before this meeting started, what I would like to show you is that these transformative 12 technologies does not stand on its own, but it actually starts complementing each other. And especially when we start going into the promoting of the value chain linkages, and the space wherein we as a business shift plays very much is how we are utilizing these technologies. Now, global connectivity. This is a slide that I saw in the US a couple of years ago. By 2024, we are saying that the world population will be situated at 8 billion, and 4.2 new billion users are going to join this digital economy from 2017. Now that means that we are looking at a 90% of these users are connected through mobile technology. So the reality is that everybody is now walking around with the ability to start connecting into an economy that previously were not part and parcel of this. It has major effects on businesses and the way that we spend it. Now, if you just look at the amount of time that you spend on average, according to this We Are Social statistics, they say that on average people are spending 3 hours and 39 minutes. I looked this morning at my own one, and it said that I was way under, although I'm very much in this type of space, I am at least way under that, with 2 hours and 42 minutes on average spending on my phone. But the reality is that there is a world that we can connect through a technology device, a cell phone that we are carrying around with us, that creates these value chain linkages. If we jump to the next one, and that is the big data and advanced analytics for insurance. But another question might derive, why are we looking at the transformative 12 technologies and then specifically referring to it in the sense of insurance? The interesting thing, if we start looking at data starts unlocking the opportunity for somebody to insure things that they previously would not insure. It might be because it was too expensive, because they need to address that risk. But when you do insurance in the value chain, immediately if a product is insured, it unlocks finance. If finance is unlocked, it creates the ability for somebody to start investing into value chain financing and unlocking opportunities that previously was not there. Remember, our traditional financial systems works very much on the basis that you need to have an underlying asset that then can be bonded, and once that asset is bonded, the banks feel quite comfortable and secure that their information is now at the level, or their risk has been addressed by an underlying asset. But when we start looking at value chain finance, the banks are usually looking and say, but this asset can die, or the asset can degrade. But when you have then this big data that comes into part, all of a sudden there's proof that this risk can now be efficiently. So big data does play a major role when it gets into the opportunities for unlocking Red 12, the promoting of value chain linkages, unlocking opportunities in the value chain. So when we get into the Internet of Things, and man, do I love this slide, and specifically the photos that we have on here, because I want to really bring it back home to what we are seeing. And with the Internet of Things, there are two things here. Let's look at the cow on the right. When we put an RFID tag in the ear of that cow, we are changing him into a Internet of Things, and we create a digital twin of that animal. The moment that the digital twin then collects a lot of information. Now, the photo in the middle is a photo that I took in Grootfontein in Namibia last year. And the interesting thing of this photo is that the animals on the back of that truck, as all of them have an RFID tag in their ear. Now, how the emerging market now get the opportunity to start moving into a commercial market. Remember, the commercial market are looking at big lots. They want to fill up trucks so that it creates more efficiencies in terms of transport. But when you put an RFID tag in an animal's ear and you create a digital twin, you can now take emerging farmers as animals, which is in smaller volumes, and group them together and to get a lot that then is commercially viable for a big buyer. Because we can individually identify the animals, they can then individually be paid, although they was put together for sales. On the left, we are seeing a typical scene that we have in a shearing shed in the Eastern Cape. BKB specifically serves about 70,000 farmers and pay up in the region of excess of 200 million each year into that specific communities for their shearing. We are now looking at converting that red scale into a digital scale, and then the clip that they are collecting from there, putting that into a value chain blockchain solution that can be tracked, which immediately gives the owner of that clip that he has delivered to the value chain the ability to start unlocking financing opportunities, because now he has a unit of value that is tracked on a system and unlocks opportunities for him that might be something as simple as in that finance. Now, this is where we start getting into the blockchain thing. Now, I believe and I hope that the people on this call is very much IT orientated, so I'm not going to get in too much of the blockchain stuff. So I believe that all of us understand it. But the reason why blockchain is so important for food is, firstly, it is digital. So immediately it becomes, I heard such a good, let's call it explanation or analogy for the blockchain. It is like the subway in New York. It doesn't require you to be the richest man in New York. Anybody can drive on the subway. If you are homeless, if you are the richest man, everybody can put information on this network. So it is a digital network that is immutable. In other words, nobody can change the information because the information is shared, of course, over various nodes, and it is distributed. So it's not just in one place as we have with our traditional ERPs, where the information is put in one place and then layered around with security. It is immutable. We as a business from ShiftSide has created this AgriTrust product, where we have a blockchain solution in place that is specifically looking at the agricultural environment, where we do traceability. We do documents on it that allows the unit of value as it moves through the value chain to start adding the documents to it, as well as an insights, because it's not just about collecting information on a general ledger, it's also about creating the ability to start unlocking opportunities to see what that information means, and then we are tokenizing those in a lot. But Tony, maybe on the next time, I will specifically look at how we are utilizing and how the technology specifically work. But for today, I would really like just to focus on the value chain linkages. As you can see, the ability for mobile technology, big data analytics, Internet of Things, and blockchain starting to work together to form a more holistic value chain that then starts unlocking opportunities in the value chain and not so much individually just technologies that's sitting apart, but it's more a holistic story. Now we're getting into the more difficult things and maybe something that I'm not so well known about, but it was interesting to look at when I was looking at this presentation. And this is the creating of effective production systems. One of them is precision agriculture, specifically for water use and optimization. Now, I put some of these autonomous tractors as well as devices that is walking around in fields. And the concept that I think that comes across here is that because we now have these autonomous vehicles that is driving around on farms, they have the ability to more specifically look at how resources is applied. Or specifically looking for a photo of this planter that they have that is identifying alien plants and then specifically targeting them. But the thing is that these types of technologies now have the ability to utilize the resources that we have and not necessarily just be a genetic or general view, but exactly know where they need to put down more fertilizer or more water might be required. This is where I want to come back to the point that I raised earlier with regards to labor. I had a question the other day when I put up the slide of this autonomous tractor that they say in South Africa, we do have a responsibility in terms of labor. But what we are seeing in specifically here in the Western Cape is that the Western Cape Department of Education, for instance, has implemented some of our RFID technologies at the schools and starting to teach the kids how to use these precision tools to then learn them new skills. And it's all about not necessarily just creating work, but creating the ability for new skills. And I know that is something that the IIT PSA specifically also support, creating more technology skills that we can deliver more with less resources in the world that we are moving into. When we go into the microbiome technologies to enhance crop resistance, this is the interesting thing also where they are now looking at genetics of the plant. We have, it's not just about the insects that eat the plants, but also the genes that is when it gets dry and water is a scarcity. So this is really interesting. This is part of the technology transformative 12 technologies where they are looking at the underlying genetics of the plant and saying that if we can put why is a insect eating a specific animal, if you can take out that specific genetic item, we can alleviate that problem of maybe there's an opportunity to create more protein on the top. But anyway, it's an interesting alternative for that. But like I say, it's not just about that, it's also about the drought gene. Interesting thing that they also have as part of the Transformative 12 is the off-grid renewable energies. Now I put up these two pictures because it lies me close to the heart. This one on the left is a solar project that is called the Kaiku solar project that is in Pofadder. Now, I was driving one evening or one morning really early with my brother-in-law to go for a hunt in Namibia, and I drove past this place and it felt like a James Bond movie because I couldn't believe this major, huge solar project that was standing here in the middle of the Northern Cape. It was just unbelievable. On the right-hand side, we've got I think it's called the Key solar project that is just outside of Uppington. Now that tower is about 200 meters high in the air, and it's something to see. You can see this tower from almost 50 km from Uppington when you drive into there. These are some of the major solar projects that's coming up in South Africa. And when I was investigating more specifically for this talk, I saw that in May of this year, which was just a couple of months ago, the 11.6 billion rand project was approved just outside of Postmansburg to generate more than 100 kilowatt or megawatt of energy. It's unbelievable that we are traditionally looked at the Northern Cape specifically as this hot and dry and humid areas, and now being a paradise for solar projects that's coming up. Now, how does we bring that back to the creating of effective food productions? If we have cheaper, more renewable energy, that allows us then to be more effective in the way that we utilize our irrigation, which means that we can produce more food with more cleaner energy that is available. The second last one is gene editing for multi-thread seed improvement. Now, this is really something also, and you see there's a few of these technologies that talk about the underlying, almost want to say, genetic profile of plants. This is where they look at the plant genetic profile and they take out certain of the genetic stuff that is hampering the growth of that plant, that leads it to sickness. And it solves not just one, but it solves actually a multiple of problems with regards to plant growth and all of that underlying genetic profiles of it. But as you can see, not something that I well know, but I'm more on the livestock side. But I think it's interesting technologies when they start looking at genetic and taking that specific item of that is giving the problem. The last one, and this is one that I felt was quite, because I saw that about 20 years ago when I started in my after university, when I started my corporate career. It's the biological base crop protection and micronutrition. Now, this is something really interesting, what we saw about 20 years ago, even on the citrus farm that I worked, because we were utilizing an open hydroponic system. And when you look at the roots of the plant, you can give that plant its micro elements to then look at what does the plant need to grow more effectively by focusing on the micro elements. And then looking at that micro elements, we had the ability to have a citrus tree that most probably would have a lifespan of 18 years, still producing like a young 18-year-old, or let's call it a more 12-year-old tree, still producing like a 12-year-old tree because it got the right nutrients. Today, they have this technology so far advanced that by applying a specific type of microelement, they can manipulate the texture of the skin of a orange to suit a specific market. And I must say, it's really truly something unique. And so that brings us to the end of my transformative 12 technologies, and there is a series of articles that is set up by the World Economic Forum where they talk about this innovation with a purpose. And I've been in talks directly with the World Economic Forum, and they are putting up food hubs all across Africa, and they are looking at these technologies and seeing how these technologies can actually unlock the potential of Africa. Just imagine that Africa is a continent that can jump across all of the previous other continents' developing phases and come into an economy that can really solve the world's food problem. The reason why I am actually in Stellenbosch is back because there is some of the Northern African country in the Northern Africa that came down to look at these technologies and see how they can utilize something like blockchain for traceability, RFID technology, as well as mobile technology to unlock livestock opportunities. Now, there are a few comments that was made specifically from the World Bank as well as from India. The chairman of the Indian Agricultural Culture Union, as well as the chairman of the board from Nestle, which is saying that this transformative 12 technologies, this digital transformation, has the opportunity now to really start giving us a more renewable, sustainable food, but also, and that's the main theme of this, actually start bringing up an economy that never could have shared in specifically looking at Africa, bring up this emerging farmers into an economy that they can now also take part and parcel of. And would that not be a brilliant case study for us, or a brilliant story where Africa is utilizing these technologies now to become part and parcel of a world economy? With that, Tony, thank you very much. I know it's a lunch break and people are maybe want to have something to eat, but for that, thank you for the opportunity to share some of the ideas.
Yaku, wow. That's all I can say, really. That is so interesting. I just messaged my son, who's a software engineer, and said he should be watching this. Unfortunately, he's in the middle of his own meeting with people overseas at the moment. But maybe I've asked questions on the chat group. There haven't been any as yet, but I'd like to ask you a couple, if I may. One is,
Sure,
first of all,
please.
an observation. And when you opened up with the market trends and that, and you were talking about the challenges with meat production and polonies killing people and so on, and listeriosis, my immediate reaction was, I'm so glad I'm a vegetarian. And then I could,
are you?
I am, yes, I am. And then I could relate to the plant protein because, my family and I are sensitive to where we get our protein from. And because we don't eat meat at all. We're vegetarian, not vegan, so we still do eat some, like milk and eggs and that sort of thing. But it's interesting. But what I wanted to ask you, what fascinates me, and is, first of all, how does one get into this? I mean, I know a bit about your background, but the audience doesn't necessarily. And how on earth did you get? I mean, for me, it is so wonderful to see technology being practically used for the betterment of our population and the country, and yet potentially creating work and all that sort of thing. But wow, I mean, and thinking of, a poor cow or bull or something as an IoT device is quite fascinating.
Yes,
with an RFID tag. But how did you get into this, and how does one get into this line of technology, Yaku?
I think, Tony, from my side, my background is that I come from a banking background. So I was 11 years in corporate banking before I moved to BKB, and specifically looking at value chain financing. We believe that we need to start looking at the underlying skill of the farmer to farm, and not so much just the underlying asset. At that time, and that was 10 years ago, we utilized a network of people to investigate and see that the let's call it the cow or the sheep was still there, and for that create comfort for the bank. The unfortunate thing about that at that stage is the bank really felt really uncomfortable with this whole scenario, and that led me to enter let's call it the technology space, and looking at the underlying data and how we drive that. And I think my banking background and the ability of technology, that we brought that together and seeing opportunities that most probably, if you are working in the back office IT, or the guy that's working in the field with his frustrations, doesn't know of each other's world. And you need to start, I always want to give an invitation out. You need to get out of your office. You need to start, because I think, especially from IT people, we've got this unbelievable skill to look at the technologies that we are working with, and we are not seeing the real world problems. And by bringing those things together, and I usually ask myself, what is my true skill? What am I really doing in this world? I'm seeing that connecting the frontline requirements and the technology people together, we have the opportunity to really start unlocking opportunities that previously is really difficult for somebody to solve, because they don't know what we can do at the back of the site.
Yeah, 100%, Yaku. And I see there are one or two questions, and I'll get to them in a moment. We've still got a little bit of time in hand, and I'm also sensitive to people's lunchtime, as you are. But I think, what you're saying, and I used to work for a global CIO in the Barlow World Group, whose one expression was, from behind a desk is a very strange view of the world.
Yes.
And which totally says what you're saying. I mean, I remember when I was down in Pietermaritzburg at one of the maize and wheat mills there, and I spent a lot of time in the mill. I was the IT manager for the mill. But getting out and getting into the mill and seeing what the millers are doing, and understanding how the technology, the InTouch Wonderware system, and how they actually could run the mill almost single-handedly and actually mill maize and wheat with one miller in a huge mill. That's using technology, and that was 20-odd years ago. The other thing I was going to say, Jaco, before I get to the questions, is just an observation. I'm really encouraged by the amount of technology and technological development we're seeing in the country. I mean, I was looking at those solar farms that you said were in Pofadder and Uppington. And I know they're happening, but until you actually see them, and you actually see it. And then the technology that you're talking about, that one where the young lady was pointing at the food and was giving the whole history, the value chain of that particular item of food. I mean, it sounds mind-boggling, and yet we in technology know that's really real. It's here. But let's get to
it's unbelievable for me is that this information is there. It's always been there, and we've got the ability now through this new technology to really start connecting it and really give somebody insights into it. And I know we're also sitting with Poppy that just comes into line, and all of these questions starts popping up with regards to privacy and data protection. But there is ways around that. There is really ways around that and creating opportunities for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Nyako. As I say, it's fascinating. Dr. Lester Cowley, who's well known to many of us, from the Western Cape, nogal.
I actually wanted to make a joke about Lester in my presentation. I was thinking about this when we're talking about the 3 hours and 39 minutes. I wanted to say I definitely think Lester is not in that space. So might be surprised.
Let's have to respond. But in the meantime, he says, he asks, to what extent do these innovations decrease the hard and soft costs of food, particularly for those who are not well off? Nice question.
I think it actually decreases, well, there is various camps with regards to that, because when we try to formulate the call it the arguments about this, there's a lot of some of the corporate guys that says, listen, I get this. I get that there's a story to tell about the product, but this is for my wife that buys at Woolworths. This is not for the mass. I beg to differ with regards to that. I do think that you must understand that the people that's living at the bottom of the pyramid they've got a few bucks to spend. They cannot waste their money on food that most probably has the opportunity to make them sick, or food that is actually not good. They are more willing to pay for good quality food than what we think of. Now, it's not just about the story about the food, because when we start building these arguments, we very much focus at the end consumer, and we start building these arguments. Yes, we want to see the story of the food. But what we see when you start getting involved in these technologies, there's opportunities that actually starts popping up that then start saying, well, wait a second, there's now the opportunity to take up maybe some of the middlemen. Because when we get into the blockchain thing, remember that the blockchain was specifically developed to take out the middleman. It was developed in 2009 to take out the banks, because the bank was intermediate. That the developer, and I do, he's got this very difficult name that I sometimes struggle to say as an Afrikaans guy, but we developed this to say, I want to take out the banks. What we see from the technology when you get in part and parcel of blockchain is that it actually has the opportunity to take out the intermediates. And if you take out the intermediates, the cost of the food will come down, because now it becomes cheaper. There's less cuts that needs to be dealt off. So that's my opinion about this.
I think the word you're talking about is disintermediation. Is that correct?
Yes, disintermediation. Yes.
I'm English speaking, so. Yeah, could you just on that, and I mean, I know we speak about in terms of technology, a lot of products from cradle to grave kind of concept, from birth to. So in this case, it would obviously be from the life of the product, whether it's an animal or a plant, to the point of consumption. And I understand also, I think there's a lot of value to the retailers and so on in terms of understanding the freshness of the product. If there's a problem with it, where it's come from, is it identifiable? If there's a blight or something that's, what's the word, damage the product, or whatever the right terminology is. Am I right?
Tony, I was actually now thinking while you were saying that there's a case study currently in Walmart in the US, which rings back to what you are saying, that I want to pull the contrast to. In Walmart, they looked at meat and sales of meat. Now, Walmart is our macro, of course, in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And if you go to Makro, also sells meat, but for one or other reason, we don't buy our meat from Makro. We don't, and I'm not talking to you now because you're a vegetarian, but if you go and stand in front, and the question that I'm saying to myself, why is that? Why is it that we don't buy from Makro? And it might be because I don't trust them. Why is it that we buy from Woolworths? because we trust the brand, most probably. But what's really behind that? And what they did in Walmart, they started looking and saying, wait, okay, so in other words, somebody needs more information to formalize trust, because what they see that if somebody would buy a protein like meat, they will always buy something with that. They will put something else in the carton too. So in Walmart, they split the food. They give conventional, something with no story around it, and you can get what they call a black tray with all of the information in there. But the more interesting thing in terms of that case study for me, Tony, is that they did not, as Walmart, as the world's biggest supermarket, they did not go to the largest feedlots or abattoirs. They went to a smaller guy that made the change for them to tell the story. And that was really interesting for me, because we tend to go to the biggest guys. We want to go and knock on the big feedlots, big abattoirs, and say, would you like to tell the story about your product? And they are most probably sometimes say no, they're not interested. And even in Walmart's case, they needed to go to the smaller ones. But the question I really want to put out to any consumer, even if you go to Woolworths, if you pick up a bag, and I've tested this with my wife, if you take up 2 bags of apples, and I say to you, this bag of apples was picked last year in April and it was in cold storage up to now, or this bag of apples was picked this year in February, how different would your choices be when you make that choice? And this is where I'm saying, as a consumer, I think we need to start asking the question about our food. I really, really do believe that we need to ask our questions about our food. Where does it come from? Who does it benefit?
Absolutely. I mean, the concept of the one you're talking about, like freshness, and how fresh is our food. So one of the reasons, sorry?
The cold chain. Has the cold chain been broken? Because that is direct impact on how long it will stay fresh.
Which comes back to the whole cradle to grave or cradle to consumption chain we were talking about. I'm also intrigued by the use of blockchain in this, Jaco, but I must say you explained it really nicely, and I always thought I had a basic grasp of blockchain. But when you spoke about the, like being like a subway in New York, and the fact that an immutable, unchangeable network, anybody can use it, whether you're rich or poor or whatever, it's distributed and obviously can't be changed. And I just thought that was, thank you, a really nice way of putting it for some of us who don't necessarily get involved in the techniques and technologies of blockchain. But Jaco, let me not keep you. I know you've got a long drive back home and you've got to beat curfew.
I need to beat curfew.
you need to beat curfew. Please, we don't want you in trouble because of us. So from IRTPSA, particularly the Eastern Cape chapter, I know we've got Prof. Lynn and members of the committee on the call. So thank you to you, Jaco. This has been a really interesting chat. You spoke about a follow-up. You're on, okay? You're absolutely
if you want to talk about blockchain, I will give you a good rundown about and maybe show you your community how it actually works and how we're utilizing it. Like I said last night, I had a presentation, and you can just see these guys from deep Africa really understanding what this technology and the ability that this technology can have for them and the opportunities that it can unlock for the people that's really on the ground level. So yeah, for all means, at this stage, you can always call on me and I will present.
Thank you. Well, Prof. Lynn is on and Deborah and Andre has joined us, so I'm sure they'll pin you down because we really would welcome that, Jaco. Thank you so much. Just one other quick question before I say goodbye to you and to the delegates. Is there anything in this presentation that's confidential?
No, it's fine. You can share it.
May we publish it on the IRTPSA YouTube channel?
You're welcome.
Thank you. And for the delegates who asked, I think it was Rob Crothall, there is a recording. There always is a recording of our webinars. So they should get the link within 24 hours of this presentation closing. So look out for that as well. And we'll put it up on our YouTube in the next few days or so. Jaco, from IRTPSA to you, from Tony Parry to you, thank you so much. It's been a really, really interesting talk. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, your experiences, the great photos. I was envious of you being up in Namibia, nice part of the world as well.
It is so beautiful.
As is our own country, including the Northern Cape. So, but Jaco, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. Thank you to Prof. Lynn, Lester, Andre, Deborah. I don't know who else is on. I've missed some names. But thank you all for attending. Thank you for organising. Be safe. Watch out for this nasty COVID virus. Look after yourselves. Jaco, drive safely back. And we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye.